Hello and welcome to Department Talk Bollocks, or the parental-friendly version Department TB. Widely inaccurate, probably offensive, definitely amateur. I'm Phil.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Scott.
Scott is our highly resident sound man at the back there with his deep booming voice.
Hello.
So this is our first podcast, so forgive any pauses or inaccuracies. We've not really done much research, and the alcohol is flowing. So today we're going to be talking about Doctor Who, because I think Doctor Who might be back next week.
Next Saturday.
September the 1st.
7:20 p.m. Not that we're counting or anything. So what really interested me, I thought would be really interesting to do, would be to talk about our first memories of Doctor Who, how we got into the series, and you know why it resonates with us and why it's kind of stuck with us, or in Scott's case, why it hasn't stuck with us and we've only really recently got into it. So, do you want to start us off, Andrew?
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, I've been into Doctor Who for many, many years. I'm the old guy in here. I was born in the early 70s, so I kind of grew up with the Tom Baker era. Going into Doctor Who at the time, there was no DVDs, no videos, so it was purely about watching what was on TV, what was shown as repeats at the time. So I was really lucky that I kind of got into Tom Baker. Tom Baker was the Doctor that I grew up with.
What about Target novelisations? Did you ever read any Target novelisations?
No, I never read any Target novelisation. Never read any books at the time, to be honest with you. I was only about 4 years old. The problem is at the time, my mum used to read me stuff like Tufty. So
What is Tufty?
Tufty is a little squirrel. They used to have it actually comes from Canada, strangely enough, and it was about the stories of this little squirrel, a little bit like Magic Roundabout. He used to have different stories every single week, and I'm sure it was in one of the newspapers. But yeah, anyway, at the time, never really read anything.
Well,
so...
no, can we? No, let's go back on this Canadian squirrel. Did he have a Canadian accent? Did he say a lot? Did he go to Tim Hortons? Was he just?
Well, unfortunately, my mum didn't have a Canadian accent, so she never really talked. She never really did the Canadian accent to Tufty. I just know it was made in Canada.
Hey, Tufty, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just hanging a boot.
That's Scottish. Yeah, anyway, but the 70s for me was quite a good time. I do remember back to when I was about 3-4 years old. They started repeating a lot of the early Doctor Who to kind of get people into the Tom Baker era, because he'd been running for about a year or two.
Oh right, because I heard about in the 80s, before Peter Davison, because the trailer is on about 5 of the DVDs. They had the 5 faces of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Season when Peter Davison started, so they did repeats before that in the 70s.
Yeah, they did repeats in the 70s. What they did is, I think they were trying to get people interested in Doctor Who after John Pertwee left. Because once John Pertwee left, they didn't think that Doctor Who would survive. It was another one of those points where that happened at the start of the John Pertwee era, that they just didn't think Doctor Who would last. And they did the same thing happened with Tom Baker. They just didn't think that it will go on for many, many years. They actually signed Tom on for a couple of years just to see how it would go. And during I would say about 75, 76, they started repeating early Tom Baker ones just to get people up to what was going on and, you know, what the character of Tom Baker's Doctor was like.
So who was your first Doctor? I mean, were you aware that there were other Doctors pre-John Pertwee before?
I was aware of it through my mum. My mum was a big fan of William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton. She recognised the Doctor from the John Pertwee era more only through the time that she had a chance to watch TV and things like that. So I was aware of the earlier Doctors, but Tom Baker was principally my Doctor. He was the one that I grew up with, the one that I started with, and I was lucky to catch some of the early episodes, even though I wasn't old enough when they were first broadcast. You know, episodes like Ark in Space, Genesis of the Daleks, they repeated.
Which, let's face it, is not a bad way to start. It's not a bad intro to Doctor Who.
It's not. I mean, to be honest with you, my first proper memory of Doctor Who was an interview that was done between Louise Jameson, strangely enough, on Multicoloured Swap Shop. which had that. Oh, I can't remember his. Oh, no lemons.
Yeah.
No lemons on Multicolour Swap Shop.
Swap Shop.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And it was really funny because I remember a lot of the build up to her introduction as the character of Leela, and I even remember it so clear to this day that when I actually pulled out the DVD of Face of Evil when they released it, and watched the extras and watched that interview on Multicoloured Swap Shop, I remember every single detail. It was as if it had happened the day before, even down to the video that they'd done. I actually remember the little snippet that they'd shown of her falling at the feet of the Doctor through the sandy jungle that they had, before I actually watched that. And that is my earliest memory of Doctor Who, Leela's introduction. But I grew up with Tom Baker through those years.
I mean, like, it's funny, like, when you think about Tom Baker. I mean, I think Tom Baker was the kind of mentality that you kind of get with Matt Smith now, who is a fairly well known actor before he started in the part. I mean, he'd done Party Animals on BBC4, which is very highly regarded in lots of people, but he'd not actually, he'd not really kind of broken through, and he certainly wasn't a name. And I certainly watched the Doctor Who Confidential, which they showed on I think it was New Year's Eve, and it was like, and here's the 11th Doctor, and it was sort of like, oh right, okay, who's that? Who's this strange man with floppy hair and long fingers? And it was like, and I think that looking at Tom Baker's CV before that, he'd not really done a lot, and if you look at, like, William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, and John Pertwee, all very kind of established. Now, John Pertwee admittedly had been a face from Light Entertainment, but people still knew him and recognised him. Tom Baker, and this is probably why he kind of had so much trouble, as well as staying for as long as he did, disassociating himself from the role, is because he was the Doctor. Nobody else knew him from anything else. He happened to come in. He came in, and he happened to be brilliant. Everybody took to him, and then you couldn't sort of associate him with anything else beyond the Doctor. And I don't think you're alone there, in that a lot of people view him as kind of the quintessential Doctor. He is the Doctor, and the times when you sort of watch him being interviewed now, I mean, now I do think he's a little bit guarded, and he does kind of put on a show. There was a documentary on Sky Arts where he was in confidence with Tom Baker, and he was very much putting on a show, but you watch it and you're like, that's the Doctor. You're being the Doctor there, and it's like hello, I'm Tom Baker, and all of these fans, they think I'm a god. They want to get close to me and touch me like lepers wanting to reach out and touch Jesus.
Well, the funniest thing is with Tom Baker, I remember reading about the story before he became the Doctor. I mean, he was seen in one of the Sinbad films. I think it was Golden Voyages of Sinbad, and he played the bad guy, and I think that was the original film that was shown to Barry Letts and Philip Hinchcliffe as being is what our next Doctor could be.
Was Hinchcliffe actually even involved in the casting?
He knew he was taking over as a producer at the time, so whether he was involved in the actual casting of the Doctor, I'm not 100% sure, but I do remember that he did actually see the Golden Voyages of Sinbad at the time, and Tom Baker's involvement in that, and I know Barry Letts had more of a say.
Yeah, well, because that's what amazes me about the casting. I mean, nowadays you think it'd be unheard of. Like, if Stephen Moffat's coming on board, but as producer, but no, Stephen's not casting the Doctor. Russell T Davies, the departing producer, is going to cast the next Doctor, which is going to essentially tie up the producer, and you're going to be. I mean, thank God that Philip Hinchcliffe and Tom Baker got along famously and produced some of the best Doctor Who of the series. And and the first story of the era is written by Terence Dicks, the script editor of the John Pertwee,
which was pretty much a third Doctor era story.
Yeah, I mean that's mad. I mean, like, it'd be mad to think of it now. Like, you sort of get the end of time, and then what became the 11th hour. Imagine if that had been written by Russell T Davies, and he'd have like set up the 11th Doctor. It's unheard of now, but I mean that kind of thing sort of went on a lot more in BBC production, and there'd be sort of these handover periods, and I think Philip Hinchcliffe shadowed Barry Letts on.
He did for the first series, but Barry Letts was the smaller part in that. Philip Hinchcliffe did have quite a large involvement in that first series.
Yeah, I don't want to
and Robert Holmes did in many ways. And I think the as far as I can remember, I'm not 100% sure, but I know Philip Hinchcliffe did have some sort of involvement or some sort of say over who was going to become the Doctor at the time, because that was the Doctor he was going to work with. But then, I mean, back to what Tom Baker was doing at the time, apart from Golden Voyage of Sinbad and the odd theatrical production that he was doing, I remember that he was working on a building site, and he actually heard that he got the job as the Doctor while he was hunking bricks on one of those hob carriers on a building site, to which one of the photographs of the time was a picture of him surrounded by his building workmates, when he found out that he was becoming the Doctor, and it was just I think for the time it was just this amazing. Oh, that's some mobile phone going off somewhere as normal with these amateur productions. I just think it's amazing that these stories of the way that people become celebrities in a sense still come from small things. Still come from a guy working on a building site finding out that he's got the Doctor Who job.
I mean, so if we like moving on to my first exposure to Doctor Who.
Oh yeah, we've got to do that. We can't keep sticking with me.
No, it's interesting. I could listen to it for hours. I love hearing kind of stories like that, and I am like eternally jealous of people who actually got to grow up. I mean, I'm jealous of children now. Like, I see kids buying copies of Doctor Who Adventures, and I want to slap them and just say, do you realise how lucky you are? I never got that.
Well, in some ways, I'm actually jealous of the people who grew up in the 60s and actually got to watch William Hartnell on his first journey, and Patrick Troughton on his first journey, and John Pertwee on his first journey. So in some senses, I kind of understand what you're thinking, even though you grew up in the 80s with Peter Davison and Colin Baker and so on and so forth.
Actually, I'm a little bit younger than that.
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
So,
I'm not really that old.
Sorry, I don't mean to no, my first exposure to Doctor Who, I can't remember how old I'd be. Probably 5, 6, something like that. Maybe a little bit older. I don't want. Maths isn't my subject. I failed my GCSE. Had to resit it for a second time. But it was 1993.
Good grief! So you never actually got to see them in the original transmission?
No, never got to see them in the original transmission. It was 1993, and it was the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who.
I remember that.
And they repeated. I think it was on BBC One, Planet of the Daleks, and they sort of did these little opening segment because the episode's 25 minutes, and they filled it in a half an hour slot with they called it Doctor Who and the Daleks, and it was a 5-minute documentary segment. There was one that was on the Antiques Who Roadshow, which I think is on the Horror Fan Rock DVD, which was about the various merchandise. There was one about Unit, where there was a hotline to recruit Unit or something. He called it up, and Nicholas Courtney, who played the Brigadier, would give you a message telling you how you could secretly join Unit or something along those lines. There was one with Ian Levine being very angry about missing episodes.
As he always is. Ian Levine is very angry person. I do like him, but he's a very angry person.
We'd just like to sort of, state that Ian Levine has done a lot for fandom.
But that's what I'm saying, I love him.
Yeah, he's a very, very passionate man, and there was, I remember him getting angry about the missing episodes. So and my dad was watching it, and I think my mum was going to church choir or something, because it was 7:30 on a Friday night, and normally my mum would have dominance over the remote watching Coronation Street. I mean, that's why my dad stopped watching Doctor Who in the 80s. It wasn't those sort of typical reasons a lot of people couldn't warm to Sylvester McCoy. That wasn't it. It just happened to be going out on a Friday night, a Friday or a Monday night or something against Coronation Street, and there's no way, if you know my mum, there's no way that he would get dominance over the remote, so he just stopped watching it. But for whatever reason, sorry, Scott.
was just going to ask, basically, at the end of the day, all I've got envisioned in my head is basically is your dad not standing up to you. Well, what was she doing exactly to say to him, basically, we're watching Corrie? Did she beat him with a frying?
Yeah.
What did she do exactly?
She's just got this kind of evil stare. It's very kind of similar to like a Doctor Who monster, I think.
So your mum was like the Yeti.
Yeah.
So when the Yeti come up, you turn the telly off.
A less hairier version of the Yeti. That's my mum, and it was like. You don't want to watch Doctor Who, do you? We're going to watch Coronation.
Oh, she was a
Cyberman. That was more Alec Guinness.
Yeah,
basically.
I was thinking more early Cybermen, but
we're going to find out what's happening to Rena Sharp.
I'm just really glad none of my family likes
Coronation 3 was finished, and you'd be like, what's happened?
Yes. You really want to know what's going on with Raquel and Des Barnes? Yes, I do.
Look into my eyes, yes. Look around the eyes.
Yeah, you don't want to watch Remembrance of the Daleks. So my dad had kind of stopped watching, but for whatever reason, my mum wasn't in on Friday night, and for 6 weeks, we kind of sat down and watched Planet of the Daleks. And I don't really know what resonated with me. Like, it's like a lot of people talk about, watching one of the older ones and sort of, older episodes and the effects being ropey and how it won't speak to children or whatever. But not at all. Like, I completely bought into it. And then what was really fascinating was, like, I got an insight into fan culture, into kind of the mythos of the production of Doctor Who, because episode 3 of Planet of the Daleks was in black and white, because the BBC... I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will probably know, but the BBC systematically junks a lot of their master tapes and a lot of the archive up until probably when Tom Baker started, I think. Yeah.
I think it was late John Pertwee. I think towards like mid to late John Pertwee.
Yeah.
That's when they realised they had something that they could sell abroad. So they kind of kept a lot of the original master copies of it, and even early John Pertwee, they still had a lot of the master copies. I think it was mainly or primarily during the Hartnell Troughton era, but
the last episode that is kind of missing is Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Episode 1 is in black and white. It's only available in black and white because I think what they did was they made black and white copies for international sales. So there are some John Pertwee stories like Ambassadors of Death, which is coming out on DVD soon, where they've had to recolorize it using a very complicated process called chroma dots, which we won't go into because everybody will fall asleep. But
I know I certainly will.
Yeah, but yeah. So episode 3 of Planet of the Daleks is only available in black and white. It was recolorized on the DVD using funny, some kind of amazing technical process. But so that was actually kind of interesting to me. It was like, well, I remember it was colour last week. It was in colour last week. Why is it suddenly gone in black and white? It was like, is this some kind of creative decision? No. So that really kind of, and then around about that time as well. And I'm really looking for, this is coming out on DVD next year with Sharda, I think, is a documentary that was called 30 Years of the TARDIS, and then they released it on VHS in an extended cut called More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, and it's made by Kevin Davis, who's an Uber fan, and also does a lot of has done Hitchhiker's Guide documentaries and Blake Seven and stuff, and so it was really kind of, I never had a doctor. I was kind of instantly presented with this world. So there was this documentary which kind of like gave an overview of the series, and it was sort of fascinating to me to see, different actors, and then, you'd ask, and then I remember, like, sort of as I was getting into Doctor Who, asking different people what they remembered, and they'd be sort of like, oh, I could never get into so-and-so, and it was never the same for me. I always thought of Peter Davison as a vet from All Creatures Great and Small, and I couldn't get into, so there would be all these kind of different stories.
So if you mentioned that was my story as well. But, yeah.
So it was interesting for me because I kind of got this kind of overview, and I was into a lot of other different things, Star Trek and stuff, and it was only like Christmas presents and VHSs, so I would never got an era in order. The first VHS that I ever got, and you're going to put your head in your hands, Andrew.
I probably will.
It was Silver Nemesis.
Oh, good grief.
So it was Silver Nemesis, which is a Sylvester.
You can't actually see me putting my head in my hands, but I am putting my head in my hands.
Which is a Sylvester McCoy story.
Yeah.
With the Cybermen.
Yeah, but I did like Sylvester McCoy to a point. But yeah, Silver Nemesis was.
And it's not particularly. It's not fondly regarded.
No, it's not fondly regarded.
It's kind of. It's sort of bordering on pants. I think it's quite fun.
I think it's better than Sylvester McCoy's first series.
Yeah.
At least it's got that going for it. Because the first series of Sylvester McCoy was really cheesy, pantomime.
Yeah.
It did improve. It did improve when he started introducing the man of mystery style to him.
I mean, the thing
lot.
is, like, I suppose it's just the way I consume things, but if I'm kind of into something, like I knew that I like Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor. So I saw Time in the Rani. I've watched that first series, and to begin with, it certainly didn't resonate with me. I thought this is terrible. This is cheesy, and then it's these crafty documentaries on the DVDs. You watch them, and you hear what they were trying to do, and then you read like some kind of contrary fan review where they give a rave about Delta and the Bannerman, and then. I mean, maybe this just means that I haven't got a very critical eye and that I'm just affected by other people. I'm easily swayed. But I start to review things and start to look. I mean, like, let's be honest. Time in the Rani, it's
embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, and there's nothing like it in the whole of Doctor Who.
Yeah, even Sylvester McCoy. It's been a long time since I watched it, but wasn't there a little scene where the Rani was impersonating Mel?
Yeah.
And you got this really cheesy Rani version of Mel who I couldn't stand anyway. Yeah. I really could not stand the character.
To explain this to Scott, right? Basically, there was an actress called. Have you ever heard of Bonnie Langford?
Bonnie Langford was terrible.
No,
you don't want to know. You don't want to know.
Just William. There was a TV.
She was basically this red-haired, annoying-voiced woman
who came. She came from like the musical theatre stock.
Okay.
So she shouted a lot. She really got out there with a voice, and it was this annoying, high-pitched voice. In her first story, the producer, who was a fan of musical theatre, he got her the reveal of the monsters, the Vervoids, which are. Look a little bit like vaginas, to be honest. And she screamed.
She screams at them, and the producer John Nathan Turner got her to scream in the key of the Doctor Who theme tune. So she would scream, and then it would go into the cliffhanger. It would go into the theme tune, and it would be in the same key.
Unfortunately, that scream was her voice.
Yeah, but I mean, I actually think I actually do quite like that. It's like Kate O'Mara. The Doctor in his post-regenerative amnesia state, he's been separated
only because Colin Baker didn't want to appear in that story.
Yeah, he's
not wanting to appear.
No, he'd not read the script.
I think what it was is because he got fired.
Yeah,
he just didn't want to do it anymore. Yeah.
But in his post-regeneration amnesia, the Rani, who's the evil Time Lady, wakes him up, and she impersonates his companion Mel, and she dons a ginger wig and wears the same outfit. Hello, Doctor, and it's so accurate. And apparently in the rehearsal room, like Kate O'Mara gave a very kind of subdued performance when Bonnie Langford was there, and then when the tape was rolling and Bonnie Langford wasn't on set, she just like went all out on it, and it is completely accurate. In fact, I think you could have done the rest of season 24 with Kate O'Mara as Bonnie Langford, and nobody would have noticed the difference.
Mind you, I think I would have preferred it.
Mm-hmm.
Only because the cheese count was quite
high. I do feel that I've got to say that I have enjoyed Bonnie Langford's. I do think a lot of the weakness was in the writing, and there was a great.
Pip and Jay Baker hold their hands up for being the weakest of
there was a great Big Finish audio with Bonnie Langford called The Fires of Vulcan, which is worth checking out, where she was actually very good, and you kind of got an insight like what she would do with better script. And I certainly think it's down to direction as well. I think she was certainly encouraged. She was give us Bonnie Langford, I think, was her direction. Give us. And I think if she had been pushed, she's a perfectly fine musical theatre actress. She's done like
I don't knock her enthusiasm. I think her enthusiasm was always there. I mean, she's a very intelligent person, and it sometimes came across in her character. It was just that unfortunate that, like you say, the direction that was given to her at the time was be this, rather stupid companion that screams at every opportunity and constantly questions the Doctor in a way that, even the most feeble-minded person in the audience would probably think, why is she even asking that question?
I mean, and as backstories go, like a computer technician from Pease Pottage who's obsessed with health and fitness.
Where did Pease Pottage come from? I want to know that. Did John Nathan Turner pick up a can of peas and say, I don't know,
it really does exist. I believe it's a little bit like Tunbridge Wells. It really does exist, but like John Nathan Turner, and I don't know, and I mean, I suppose our listeners will be thinking now that we're being incredibly nice, and that every time it sounds like we're going to knock somebody, we kind of retract it. Like I think that's another story for another podcast. Like I do think John Nathan Turner did do a lot of good, but he got this idea that he was really good at creating characters.
See, the problem with me, and I'll have to interject here, and I know we're trying to be nice here, but John Nathan Turner in many ways, he kept Doctor Who alive, and I must admit, and I'll stand up for that, he did keep Doctor Who alive. He did have a certain intelligence to him that managed to come up with some very creative and original ideas, but at the same time, I think John Nathan Turner ruined Doctor Who. And it's a 50-50 with me, and it always has been, that John Nathan Turner kept Doctor Who alive for at least 10 years, but at the same time, I think he ruined it. He was the one that I don't want. I'm not totally against JNT. I never have been, but there's certain parts about it that if other people
there are some
position could have done
mind-boggling decisions. Yeah, and I think if you really want to evidence that, read Earthshock, the novelisation of Earthshock, and read Eric Saywood's description of the spaceship's commander, and then watch the televised Earthshock and see Beryl Reid. From was she in from the Carry On films or
she was in a couple of
no
she was never in the Carry On films, but she played comedy a lot.
Yeah, but then watch Beryl Reid in Earthshock, and you'll see some of the questionable decisions that he made. Sometimes it worked out really well, like Ken Dodd as the Tollmaster in Delta and the Bannerman. That is exactly as it is on the page.
I'm just imagining him with his tickling stick.
My review of Ken Dodd in Delta and the Bannerman would be tatty hilarious.
So not as bad as Richard Breers in the Paradise Towers.
You know, Richard Breers that
anti-Hitler sort
of. What really kind of bugs me, what really upsets me about that, I watched Paradise Towers again recently,
and laughed.
Is Richard Breers is really good in 1 to 3. And then he gets possessed by the creature that's downstairs in the basement, and he does what he thinks is like it's essentially a dead person, a shell of a man possessed by something, and he starts talking with this disembodied kind of voice and moving in a very kind of robotic zombie way, and it really kind of takes
which kind of goes through the whole of Who history in a way, because if you look back to even early years, I remember I can't remember the name of the guy who played him, but he was quite a famous actor, died quite recently. He was in a series, Waiting for God, and he played a character, Graham Crowden, I think his name was, and he was in Holmes and Nimmo. And I always remember that he was originally going to be cast as the Doctor. He was one of the forerunners for playing the Doctor before Tom Baker was the part. And he played this really hammy, over-the-top character in Holmes and Nimmo, that watching that episode, you could actually say, there is no way in all hell's bollocks would I ever like to watch him as playing the Doctor, because he played this really hammy, nasty, over-the-top character that I hate in TV. I really hate the hamminess that comes in. So the history of these bad character actors do date back to years and years ago. I think with the 80s it kind of became overblown because of the way that 80s TV was filmed, because of the fact that they wanted this sort of colour and even down to the music. It was all synthesised and purely a lot of the 80s Doctor Who came across as being quite false.
Right.
In that sense, and I think it was because of the use of instruments that were false instruments, the use of effects that they tried to do that they could have done 10 years ago in a different way and done better, but they just kind of wanted to push the boundaries, but they never had the money to do it.
And then sometimes sort of, you know, getting carried away with it. They've got something good, so they'll just overdo it a little bit.
Yeah,
like, there's this amazing, absolutely amazing model shot at the beginning of Trial of the Time Lord. And it is great.
Yeah, it is. It's probably the best model shot in the whole series.
It's so good that I think even when they trailed the Paul McGann TV movie in America, it's on the special features, they actually used that shot in the trailer, presumably because when a time traveller dropped in from another world. I assume they used that because the effect shots hadn't been fit.
I mean, that's something that you could get away with today.
Yeah, it looks really good, but it shouldn't have been in Trial of the Time Lord. In the sense that, you know, you'd spent way too much money on that when you should have spent money on the trial set because you're spending 14 episodes in a sodding courtroom.
Whereas the way I looked at it is they could have actually filmed that on location and probably saved money.
Yeah, and it looked
had a better trial set.
And I mean, like, if you looked, perhaps like look at the. I mean, like, I don't know how these things work, but I mean, like, you could have, if you budgeted it differently, instead of shooting it like four separate stories, if you'd actually done location work, just, you know, you lock the scripts beforehand. In the hiatus year, you know, locked the scripts beforehand and then shot all of the courtroom sequences on location in one go. It could have. I don't know. I don't even know if that was possible, but it certainly. I think it certainly would have looked a lot better. You know, could have even used the House of Commons set at Granada Studios or something like that,
or even the Sherlock Holmes set at Granada Studios just for a laugh.
Yeah. So going back to my intro to Doctor Who, so Sylvester McCoy was kind of like there was something about the McCoy era that definitely felt like the television I was watching at the time. It feels a lot like early 90s children's BBC. There was all sorts of there was the comics in Doctor Who magazine. There was the New Adventures books, which I kind of dipped in a little bit until my dad was reading me one of those one night before I went to bed and realised they were a little bit filthy. I think it was that one by David Banks called Iceberg, which has got some pretty graphic sex scenes in or something like that. I can't remember.
Sex in Doctor Who, really?
Yeah. So he realised that
maybe these
aren't for kids. We'll stick to target novelisations from now on. So McCoy definitely felt like my Doctor. There was the Dapol figures. So he kind of, even though I didn't actually, and then because I like Silver Nemesis, I wanted more McCoy. So he kind of feels a little bit like my Doctor. But I was definitely aware that there were more Doctors out there, and I was, you know, regeneration has never been a problematic concept for me in the way that it would be for, you know, somebody who was watching it and then all of a sudden their Doctor of 3 years changed.
Similar to the new series now where Christopher Eccleston came in, a lot of the kids saw Christopher Eccleston, thought this is the Doctor, and then suddenly I know the reason behind Christopher Eccleston leaving, which we won't talk about here because obviously it'll go into too much time, but the fact that he then regenerated into David Tennant, it did actually shock a lot of people because at the time, even though it was played on an existing series, it was classed as a new series. All the kids that were watching it thought this was a new series, didn't realise the history behind it. At that point, they do now because obviously, you know, with the exposure that it's got, people are now looking back at the old series. But at the time, it was like a regeneration, and everyone was shocked. Yeah. Everyone didn't realise that. It's so
funny to watch those kind of debates come up again. It's like the tabloid press, especially. It's like you know, people aren't going to warm to this new Doctor. It's a new, and it's like we've been here before.
Yeah. I'm lucky because I've seen so many regenerations now that when the new Doctor takes over, I'm actually looking forward to it. You don't want to see. You know, I don't want to see the back of Matt Smith. But on the other hand, when they do announce the casting of a new Doctor, you kind of, you know, you're exciting. You're looking
it's
forward
really
to
kind
it,
of like, and especially with the last regeneration. I mean, I think Tennant's regeneration was so early into it. It didn't really have much of a tonal shift. The title sequence didn't change. The writing style didn't change. It got, you know, the palette of the production design. Nothing really changed. But with the 11th Hour, it was a complete change, and there was something really exciting about this. It was like, this is Doctor Who, but it's not like the Doctor Who that I've been watching for the last 4 years.
Which was interesting to me because I go back to the older series. I mean, even though I didn't get a chance to watch early Tom Baker, in between like then and now, I've got a chance to see that Planet of the Spiders robot changeover. Now I can understand that Robot was very similar to John Pertwee's era, but then suddenly it hit with Ark in Space and it completely changed direction.
Yeah.
You know, Tom Baker wanted to get away from unit, he wanted to get away from that idea of having people backing him, the soldiers with the guns, and I can understand the complete tonal change because it happened during that back in the Fourth Doctor's era when he took over. It had a tonal change, and that's what I enjoyed about it. You know, because each time a new Doctor comes in, there's a bit of a tonal change there. Because there was between Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant. A lot of people didn't notice it. I did. I noticed that tonal change between the two, you know, and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, we're getting to about 35 minutes now. We're actually talking bollocks for 35 minutes. Can you believe it? We've not even done what we were originally planning.
I was just checking to see that we're still recording. That's all.
Oh, we're still recording. Yeah.
Right. So Scott. Let's
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally.
Can we get into Scott?
Scott. So you're
Sat in the background.
You know, you're our innocent, you know, who virgin. Have
you had sex with who yet?
Yeah,
how did you get your Doctor Who cherry popped?
I've got to interrupt. Firstly, I've got to ask. Before you started watching Doctor Who, you got into it. Did you ever once think Doctor Who was his actual name?
Well, with me, it was pretty much that repeat was like my first exposure to it at all. Like I wasn't really aware of Daleks or anything. So for me, it was very quickly pointed out to me by my dad that his name's the Doctor.
I never questioned it.
Never.
Never.
And
I was too young.
And it really confused me then watching the Peter Cushing movies where he introduces himself. I am Doctor Who, and this is TARDIS. I was like.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it was always known as the Doctor. Never questioned it. I was too young to question it. Simply, I mean, you know, at the age of 5 years old, you don't question that this guy's called the Doctor. So, you know, that's to me, he's always the Doctor.
Yeah, and nobody ever refers to him as Doctor Who in the series.
Unless you watch some of the old William Hartnell episodes where it's actually under the cast list as Doctor Who.
Yeah, the first series of
I think it was War Games.
Well, I think for the first three Doctors actually it was listed in the cast.
Not all of them. I think War Games was one that he actually listed as. Oh no, that was Wotan, wasn't it? The computer that said, "Bring me Doctor Who."
Is sweet.
Yeah, and it was like, okay.
You know, obviously the writer hadn't really watched the series that much.
Yeah.
That must be just to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's probably something for a whole different podcast. But that's something really interesting. Is like you look at something like Doctor Who or like Seven or something like that, something with like where there are recurring characters like that, and there isn't VHS. So you can't just hand a tape to a writer and say this is the series. You can hand them scripts, but a lot of them, like, you wonder, like, how much about the premise did they know, or how much did the script editor have to change?
I was going to say, why didn't the script editor pick up on that?
I mean,
that's just ridiculous. I mean, I know it was towards the end of William Hartnell's run, and the script editor was going to be changing over to a new one ready for the Patrick Troughton era. But I'm surprised they didn't catch up on that. But maybe it was because of the constant turnover of episodes back then, because they were filming an episode every week.
Or maybe the script editor was about to change it, and then he had some kind of weird foreknowledge. He was like, "No, you know what? I can make Gallifrey Base when this thing called the internet is invented in so many years' time. In 2012,
which I might add here, because we're coming from Manchester. The internet was actually invented here in Manchester."
It's like, you know, one day this thing called the internet will be invented in Manchester, and I can there'll be this thing called a message board, and I can encourage passionate debate on this message board, and people can get very, very angry if I just leave this one line of dialogue in. Maybe
Next question.
So Scott.
Yes.
Yes.
Tell us.
Come on.
Okay. Well, I got into it from Torchwood. I started thinking to myself when Doctor Who just got introduced. I remember my mate Dominic.
You mean the revival?
The revival. Sorry, the revival. My friend Dominic Hill. He said to me, "Oh, I've got to watch it. It's Christopher Eccleston from South," and I thought, I'll give it a try. see what it's like. And I thought, what a bag of shite. I thought, what the fuck is this? You've got mannequins that are coming to life and killing, well, they're just animated, you know, just mindless, or did they have feelings, emotions? Were they killing for intent?
It's all in there.
I don't know, but I couldn't get into it. I just thought, what the hell am I watching?
I bet you were watching the Slovene episode as well, because I thought that. But anyway, yeah.
So I didn't watch any of it. Then it got moved over to David Tennant, so I thought, well, look, Christopher Eccleston, last of the season, he can't have done that well, so it must have been rubbish. So I thought to myself, all right, I'm not going to touch it. And Torchwood had come out, and I didn't know it was technically a spin-off because I'd not watched any where Captain Jack Arness comes into it in the first season. I came across Torchwood, and I thought, oh, well, it sounded this. I just, finished all the Buffys and Angels again, and just started Sanctuary at the time, and I thought, oh, let's give this a try. 2 seasons, brilliant. If I like it, I've got a lot to watch. So I started watching it, I thought, brilliant. And then I watched them all and thought, oh, now what do I watch? So I thought, right, well, let's start from the David Tennant season. If Torchwood is this brilliant, Doctor Who might have a chance. And so I started watching the David Tennant and thought, what a brilliant season. And then I thought, let's go back to Christopher Eccleston again, and still thought, what a bag of shit.
But did you watch all of the Christopher Eccleston? Did you catch them all?
I finally did get through all of them,
right.
But I just wasn't that impressed. I just couldn't get into it. I don't know whether it's Christopher Eccleston or Billy Piper just starting a basic acting career that clearly showed horribly.
You know what? I just like to say I do like Billy Piper. I think she's a fine actress. She was very good in the Shakespeare Retold. I liked her in the Canterbury Tales.
Can I add to that? I like Billy Piper's tits. That's about it. Sorry, if her tits could act, I'll just go with that because yeah. Anyway, back to what it is. I mean, the reason I'm asking about did you manage to watch all the Christopher Eccleston ones is because there was a couple of episodes in the first series with Christopher Eccleston that really stood out from the rest of them, and that was The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. It was the one set during the World War.
I've got to admit, Empty Child, out of all of the Christopher Ecclestons, I didn't mind that one.
See, now that was the highlight of the first series, and I found that really that gave me the opportunity to get into the new series, because at that point I was still umming and ahhing over whether it was going to work or whether it wasn't going to work. But at that point,
I think a lot of it. I mean, I think there was in the first series, and this is what actually in the 2005 series. This is why I really like revisiting it, because they've done some things that they've not done since. It's definitely trying to find the tone. It's trying to be a family drama, and it kind of wants to speak to the Tracy Beaker generation, I imagine, or whatever the kids watch these days. It's really trying to find its voice to be able to and I think sort of in the second series they kind of nailed that down a little bit more and found a way for it to speak to perhaps a more an adult audience, but at the same time give kids what they want. I mean, I don't know. The thing is, I don't know any kids, and it would probably be a little bit creepy if I went and stood outside of school and asked them their opinions on the first series of Doctor Who.
Yeah,
I don't know whether burping nesting conscious, whether burping auton bins made children laugh. I don't know whether farting Slovene made.
It made me embarrassed. Let's put it that way.
Excuse me, do you mind not farting while I'm trying to say the word? I don't know whether that, but I can certainly see what they were trying to do there, and I think. I mean, like, on the one hand, you just said that you watched Tom Baker as a child, and you never felt like it was, talking above you.
Well, I think when we'll have to move on quickly to our top 5 because we're running out of space here because we're on 43 minutes.
We'll cut it in half and make it a 2-parter.
When I was looking at it as a child, it was the Hinchcliffe Holmes era, and the Hinchcliffe Holmes era was quite adult in the way it approached things. So it never really talked to children. It was talking to everybody in general, because they kept that sort of adult theme. It got a lot of complaints at the time, actually, mostly from Mary Whitehouse, over its adult content, which you look back on today and sometimes think was a little bit weak in comparison to what you're seeing on modern shows today. But it never talked down to children. looking back on some of the Pertwee eras, again, it didn't really talk down to children because it was quite action orientated. That sort of unit army feel that they had with it. Even the Troughton and the William Hartner era, it didn't really talk down to children.
I mean, what's really interesting is like there doesn't seem to be a sense of watching some of those early, they know how to make an exciting story, they know how to appeal to children, but there doesn't seem to be a sense of how to censor it, or you watch the in the 100,000 BC, which is something that Doctor Who fans tend to sort of cough and pretend they don't and not mention because it's completely contrary to the Doctor's character. There's a moment where he picks up a rock and he's going to crush in the skull of this caveman to escape, and it's like, and there are these sort of mind-bogglingly moments, or these like really kind of oddly graphic moments where they don't seem to, and even in like Paradise Towers, which I was watching recently, there's a moment where they actually pick up, where she picks up like a butcher's knife and takes it to Mel, and it's like, this is really really.
But I remember the turning point. I do remember that slight turning point in the 70s where it became a program for everybody to a program for kids, and it was when Graham Williams took over, and it wasn't Graham Williams' fault because Graham Williams was a really good producer, had some fantastic ideas, but he was limited by the BBC on the adult content that he could show in the show in Doctor Who, and it was through people, and I'll talk about her now because unfortunately she's passed away now, rest in peace, blah 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 blah. But Mary Whitehouse really was the bane of TV at the time. She'd complain about a woman showing flesh on her arm on BBC and thinking that it was too sexualised. But she had that much to say, and she was heard that much that the BBC started to tone down Doctor Who during the Graham Williams era, and Graham Williams had to start abiding by certain rules, and he actually started to introduce the show for kids, and that's where the introduction of K9 came from, where he was basically told that this is a show that's a certain time on a Saturday night that primarily kids are watching, even though it was 50-50, it was kids, adults, all of them, and he had to tone down the show, and that's the turning point in Doctor Who where it started to become childish.
There's a great moment on in the More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS documentary where Mary Whitehouse is interviewed. I don't know whether it's archive or whether it was recorded for that documentary, where Mary Whitehouse describes the end of an episode of The Deadly Assassin where Doctor Who was drowning, and that image was left in the child's mind for a whole week. And then, you just think to yourself, if they were clever enough to come up with these wonderful plots, that to do something that disturbing was just perhaps a little bit dumb.
So this is where they start wrapping children in cotton wool, isn't it? And that's the problem with today.
It's exciting. I mean, like, I imagine sort of watching that episode of The Assassin and thinking, oh gosh, it's like he probably went under the water. It's like, is he dead? And then there's another one where he gets his leg trapped in a points on a railway, and there's a train heading towards him, and that's exciting. Like,
it is,
and I don't think. I mean, that's another that we could go on for hours about that. But I think there's something good about being scared.
I think frightening a child, but because it's the hero, and you know that the hero is going to come back. Because at the end of the day, Doctor Who isn't like the films that you see today, where a hero could die in the film. Doctor Who at the time, you knew Doctor Who was going to be coming back next week. You knew he'd get out of it.
And it's fantastic.
But it just gives you that heightened sense. There's a bit of drama there.
Yeah, it's fantastic drama. It's Doctor Who and the Daleks. It's not Doctor Who and the drug dealer that lives in the flat opposite. It's not real. It's not in the real world. I mean, I do think every now and again, there'll be autons and things that take imagery from, but it's always safe. It's a safe kind of scare. And I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. And I think
you're going to have to accept that one day the Doctor will die. basically 13th generation comes about, and where's it go?
I think they figured out something behind that.
The Master did it.
Russell
23 times at least.
Russell T Davies fixed it with one line of dialogue in the Sarah Jane Adventures. Clyde asked him.
Oh God.
Clyde asked him. So can you change? Can you be a woman? And he's like, yeah. Can you change colour? Yeah, I can be any colour I want to be. How many times can you do it? Is there a limit on it? 507. So it's sorted. The
thing is, though, the Time Lords have gone now, and I think the Time Lords have set the limit of 13. So, and now the Time Lords have gone, it can go on forever.
You can tell a really interesting story if you want to do about how the Doctor gets more regenerations. I mean, I imagine if they went down that route, like his body could only regenerate 12 times or whatever, I imagine that the Doctor would never choose to extend his life like that. I can't imagine. I think that'd be a little bit selfish. But if he had it foisted upon him, there could be a really interesting story there. Or you could just completely gloss over it, and there we go. There's the Doctor changing into Bill Nighy or whoever, whoever the Doctor number 13 happens to be.
Thing is, though, with Bill Nighy, all I can imagine him is being hit in the head with a spade.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being the Doctor Who now after seeing him being hit in the head with a spade, or having the top of his head chopped off in Underworld. But anyway, back over to Torchwood and the introduction to Doctor Who. I mean that's I know you're not so keen on the Christopher Eccleston.
That's really interesting because there's a contingency of Doctor Who fandom which isn't particularly fond of Torchwood. I love Torchwood because I think it's just barking mad.
I thought Torchwood was too childish for being an adult series.
Well, that's what I liked about it.
It's too all over the place. I mean,
let's make an adult series by saying fuck about 20 times in an episode, and that was it. That was all Torchwood. To me,
lest we forget the same-sex kissing in the episode. Let's make two girls kiss.
To me, Torchwood should have been
worse in the season 4 of Torchwood, where they've got full-on gay sex.
No, you see, Torchwood to me, if it had ever been as adult as it should have been, Torchwood should have had sex straight on. It should have been like True Blood. Torchwood should have been Americans' True Blood for England. Yeah. And that's what it should have been. You should have had naked people, lots of sex, lots of blood, guts, God knows what else. And it didn't have it. And they kept saying Torchwood is for adults. And it never was. I watched it, looked at it and thought, this is possibly the most childish series I've ever seen. This should be on children's BBC with the word "fuck" beeped out.
It's almost like they listened to what you said, because in the second series, I don't know whether it was because Captain Jack was coming back into Doctor Who and they were aware that children would be curious about Torchwood. They actually did a cut down version which was shown at
I remember that.
Not released it on DVD, so it's like if you didn't DVR it, then
the thing that got me is that possibly the most sexiest thing in Torchwood, and this is really annoying because it's also the lowest rated Torchwood episode, is that woman in the Cyberman costume.
Oh,
I mean, it's the terrible episode, but I did enjoy watching her in that Cyberman
Cyberwoman. I mean, I think the sexiest thing is probably the John Barrowman's arse.
Okay, yeah, we'll go with that. I'm still thinking of True Blood now, but yeah.
I would say. I mean, I think perhaps we should leave Torchwood because we could go on for hours about whether we like it or not.
I think at this point we should actually start talking about what our favourite episodes are. Okay, that's the end of episode 1. Please tune in for the next one, because it's going to be interesting. Live long and spot bollocks.